This is Gemara in Shavuos, Daf Ches. I'm rolling on Zayin with base. We're in the middle of a lengthy brayso. We like all the learning to be an incredible zchus for shlema for Tinoik ben Miriam Ahuva. So about 15 lines to the bottom. We just finished Shell Koides. The truth is, it's pertinent to go up a little bit. Let's just reread, relearn this whole long, lengthy brayso from the two dots smack in middle. Actually, towards the top of the Amud. Tanu Rabbanan. Again, this is going back in the part of the Mishnah that taught us Ishva Yediyah B'Tchila V'Ini Yediyah B'Saif. Then the Soyer Hanase B'Fnim, the Soyer of Yom HaKippurim that is inside, then is Mechaber. Yom Kippur itself is Taileh till he becomes aware, and then when he knows about the problem he made, then he'll bring a carbon. And again, let's just remind ourselves that the Mishnah is talking about Ein Bo Yediyah B'Saif. You didn't know about it, and that's why, of course, you couldn't bring the carbon. So we begin with the rice. Tanu Rabbanan. Again, we're just going back up for a little bit of a quick chazara to get the flow of the brisa. V'chibar l'kodesh v'tomas b'nei Yisrael. Yesh b'nei zeh lavi shalosh tomos. Says the Gemara, this pasuk teaches us 3 tomais. Number 1, and these are of course the 3 cardinal sins: Toma Vadazar, Toma Gilarayis, Tomas Shvichas Tamim. How do we see that these are all referred to and coined as Toma? Vadazar Oimer Levanti Mezmikdash. Gilarayis Oimer Shvartat Mishmarti Levelti Asu Chuksat Evois Velositamu Bahem. Shvichas Tamim Oimer Velositamu Saaretz. So now we see the Torah references these 3 aveiros as Toma. So Yochel, I would think, we're smack in the middle of the first one line is as Haaretz. Yochel Gimel Tomas Al Yisoyer Mechaber. I would think that the Sar of Yom Kippur is Mechaber Tam V'Loimer May, that extra mem. May Tomas B'nei Yisrael V'Loi Kol Tomais. Explains the Gemara. So which ones are Mechaber, which ones are not? Ma Mo'atzinu Shechol Kasav V'Chal Kol HaTomais. What Toma do we find that was specialized and was designated from all Tomais? Havi Tomas Mikdash Vika Dashov Afkan. So Tubayas is referring to Tomas Mikdash Vika Dashov Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Reb Shimon Oimer Mimakayma Yehu Mochra. Says Reb Shimon, no. This Mamotzino we do not need. Why? Because in the context of the pasuk, we can learn which Toma it's referring to. Which clearly references mitomais shel kodesh. That's really where we stopped in the previous year. So Yachal, I would think I'll call Tomais of the kodesh Yisayers and Mechaber. Maybe it's all Tomais of the kodesh, all Tomais of the Beis Hamikdash. Even what if there's a Yediyah, Betchila, and Basaif, not our case where you knew about it in the beginning and you knew about the end, I would still think maybe the Shayar Navaseh Bifnim is Mechaber, Talmud Loimar, Umi B'Sheyan Nachol Chatasam, Chatoim Dum Yod B'Shayim, says the Gemara, has to be a chait similar to a pesha. Ma B'Shayim. Just like when it comes to a pesha, when it's more rebellious, what's halacha she'inam b'nei carbon? So to have chatoim she'inam b'nei carbon. Uminayin, says the Gemara, liyisha b'yediyah b'tzchila ve'ein b'yediyah b'saif. Says the Gemara. Now, how do you know tachlis? If there is a yediyah in the beginning and not b'saif, which of course is our case of the Mishnah, she'sayer zeh toilad, we know that it holds back the punishment. That what chayav chatos b'mashma. That's referring to chayav chatos. That's the end of a long and lengthy brayso. Now we dissect it piece by piece. Omar Mar, says the Gemara. We're now 5 lines from the bottom after we've relearned the brayso. Let's take it piece by piece. Yeshli binyan zelavi gimel tomais. We've learned 3 tomais included. Tomas Avodah Zarah, Tomas Gilui Arayos, and Tomas Shvichas Damim. Says the Gemara, Hi avodah zara hechidami. The case of avodah zara, what is it referring to? Ibn Mezid, says the Gemara, Barkatalu, then he should be killed. Ibn Shaygeg, Bar Karbanu. If it's a Shaygeg, do you bring, Ibn Shaygeg, then what? You bring a regular Karban Chatos. So what's the case of avodah zara? Asks the Gemara that we're talking about that the Sar Nasa Bifnim is involved in. Explains the Gemara, B'mezid, but v'loy asrubei, or b'shaygig and v'loy yisayidei bei, and he did not know about it. And from there, we turn over to Chesam and Aleph, today's daf, and we continue dissecting this brisa. Says the Gemara, what was the next case? Gili araya isnami yechidami. Ibe means the same kasha bar katalu. Ibe shayi bar karbanu. Says the Gemara, same terms. It means v'lo yasru be v'shayeg, and v'lo yisayid be, he didn't know about it. Finally, shechazam nami yechidami means bar katalu v'shayeg bar galasu. A slight nuance of a difference, of course. We're very familiar with this. This is the whole previous Masechta Makos. How shvichas damim is bar galus. Says the Gemara, b'mezid, what's the case? And those are our three cases. In order to the case that doesn't have galus. Part A of the brisa. And again, we're bringing down these brisa to circle back around to figure out what is our case, in which is the idea about tchila. You know about the Avera originally of Tama, and you didn't know at the end. So the Sayir Anasa Bifnim is Toila until Yom Kippur is Toila, until you find out about your Avera, then you'll bring your Karbanayla V'Yairi. Amar Mar Yachla, I would think Al Shalosh Tomais Halalu. I would think for these three Tomais that what? Yesayir Mechaber, that the Sar will be Mechaber, Tamalai Marmi Tomais, V'Loik May Tomais from, but not all of Lo called Tomais. Umama teacher like as a mechlal, kol atomais mitom betomas mikdash gedashav. I've come to mikdash gedashav to Rabbi Yehuda. End of quote. Asks the Gemara, my cholak. What is this differentiation that we find? Where do we see that the Torah has differentiated that the Tumah of the Mikdash is separated? Says the Gemara, in what manner? That this special carbon that we learned back from the beginning of the Masechta, that when someone violates, whether it's the Mikdash B'Tama or Katsha B'Tama, he has a special carbon, depending on his wealth, and it's different than a regular Chatas. That's the differentiation. But ask the Gemara, but wait, Ema Avodah Zara. But maybe it's referring to avodah zara, meaning maybe the Sayir of Yom Kippur gives a kapara not on Tumas Mikdash, but rather on avodah zara. And if that would be the case, my cholak, what would the distinction, what would be special about avodah zara? Demaisi seira, like Sava, Kisba, is that avodah zara brings a female goat and not a kisva. So says the Gemara, maybe that's the differentiation. Amar Rav Kana, non chalik lahakal kamrinahan. That when I learned the Mamatzinu, I was referred to a chilik lahakel and not lahachmir. Says Gemara, okay, who? Ema yoledes. Maybe it's referring to a ledes, the chalik demaisi oilav yarid. A yoledes is also unique, and that it brings a carbon oilav yarid. Pasuk says all of their aveiros and not all of their tomais, which is what leda is. It's toma. According to Rashbi, that says a yuledes that gives birth also is considered a sinner. Why? Rashi explains because she makes a shvua never to have children again. Says Rav Shimon himself holds that from its own place is machra, and you don't need the mamatzinu at all. Says okay, ema mitzayra. Rav Aishal chol chatas v'chol tumasa mitzayra is tama. Ulev Shvaber nachmeini damar al shivas devarim nikayin bayim. But according to Rav Shmuel Bar Nachmani, even when it comes to Mitzayra, which you're right is Tumah, but it's also a form of Avira, because it comes for Shiva Dvarim, Michael and Meimar. Explains the Gemara, Asam Negai Dechaberle, V'Karban Lishtarure Bekal. Over there by Mitzayra, it's a different mechanics. The mechanics are that the nega is the kapara, not the carbon. The carbon just allows the person Lavay Bekal to come back into Klal Yisrael, but that's not the kapara. Ask the Gemara, Ve'ima Nazir Tami. But maybe when it comes with the Sayer and Yom Kippur, maybe it's coming for a kapara, for a Nazir who becomes Tami. The chalak, in what way is it differentiated? The maisi, tairim, ubnei yaina. And that it brings turtle does and young does its own special carbon. Amar avaishi alachol chatasan v'loi lachol tomasam. All of their aveiros, and again, this is a case of tama. Asking Amar Lazar Kfar, the Amar Nazir, Nami Chayte, no. A Nazir is also a Chayte, Michael Meimar. In what way is he a Chayte? He is a Chayte, Rashi explains, and that it's not the appropriate mannerism to be menader against Yayin, etc. Says the Gemara, therefore we don't need the Mamad Sinu at all. And now we're up to the third part of the Braisa. Amar, about 15 lines to the bottom. Rabbi Shimon, Aimer, Kamu, Machra, Reu, Aimer, V'chibala, Kodesh, Mitomas, Mitomas, Sai, Shal, Kodesh, V'chulu. Ask the Gemara, Shaber, Kamer, Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon seems to have a good taina. Seems to be that we could learn it straight from the Pasik. Rav Yudam Melacha, Umi Bayale, Kechi David, Lifnai, V'lifneim. Says the Gemara, no. Rav Yehuda, you know what he learns out from? As Kohen Gadol does this avodah, lefnai v'lefneim, achinami beichot, so too, he does it just like the Kohen Gadol is one that does lefnai v'lefneim, so too he does it beichot, achinavid beichot. Rav Shimon, how does he learn that out from? Oh, mevachin yasen, nafka, Rav Yehuda. Ime ahi yava, mina nesi bar v'ser achrini, v'nevid, kamash malan, that he does not have to, for Rav Shimon. What does he need the pasuk to teach us? Says Omar, the fourth part of the Braisa, 5 lines to the bottom. My new says the Gemara, what is the case that we're excluding? Which of course is not our case. That's why we're not learning it out from. But says Mara, wait, if you have Yediyah B'tchila and B'asayif, Haibar Karbano. Like Tzricha, Disyad, Leisam, L'shkias Lacham, I didn't have a chance to bring a carbon. Sal Kedei T'chamina, so what would I have thought? I would have thought, I demaisi, until he brings the carbon Olav Yared after Yom Kippur, as we turn over to Tav Chesem Ebeis, Nitzli Lei. Then until that point, maybe the carbon, the Sayer and Naslefnim will hold back the punishment, Kamash Malan, that even for that short amount of time, it will not. Amar Mar. Top line of Chesem Beis. The next part of the Braisa, which really is what we brought the whole Braisa for. Minayin sheyesh v'yediyah betchila, ve'ein ba'yediyah ba'asayif. Shesoyer zeh toila. How do we know that the Sayer of Yom Kippur holds back the punishment? Minayin. Michael Kashalei. Hachika Kashalei explains the carbon. When it's on purpose, carbon. Says the Gemara, Amos, you know, I'll tell you. Carbon. You can never bring a carbon. That's not true. That's when you can never bring a carbon. Our case, then of course there is an eventual carbon. When you eventually find out about the Aveira that you committed, what's the halacha? It's yes, bar carbonu. Therefore, ema loy litli. Therefore, says the Gemara, it will not hold it back. So you're not saying about Chotzi Yom Kippur Mechaber, Sachad Lechamina Nepach. Nepach mepach. If that was the case, says the Gemara, then what? It should have been learned out the other way. Why is that true? 1 second, I just lost the place over there. One more time. Sagadamina nepach. Nepach mepach Amar Cross, so says the Boschol Chatos Mechlal Domine Chatos, and that there is a Chatos. Says the Gemara, but wait, if there's a Kapara of an Ischaber Kapara Gemura, so then this case should give us a full-fledged kapara. Why did the Mishnah teach us that it's toilet, that it waits, and then you'll eventually bring the carbon? Answers the Gemara, Iksiv mechatosam kitkamrit. Hashach said l'chol chatasam lahanach dasi l'chlal chatos. Only those that can eventually bring a chatos. Chimiach hashin mischaber lama toilet. Says Gemara, wait, but if you're never going to get a kapara, what is the purpose of suspending the punishment? If the person dies in the interim, there's no Aveira. Rava Misa Mimarakas. What do you mean the Misa itself cleanses? Alamarava, Lahagin Lamina Yisurim. You know what it accomplishes? Protects it, that I'll have no Yisurim in the interim. That's what it will accomplish. Even though he won't ever get a real full-fledged kapara, pick it up from the 2 dots in Mirza Hashem.